Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Innovation Unplugged, the podcast where we explore the technologies and visionaries shaping the future of business and innovation. I'm Jim Brisimitzis, and today we're diving into the fascinating world of location intelligence and behavioral analytics with Fastsensor, based out of San Diego, and my very good friend, Kalon Welch. Fastsensor is a company that's revolutionizing how businesses connect to their brands to consumers in physical spaces, from retail to warehousing. Their solutions bring actionable insights to the forefront. And so with that, if you're curious about what the cutting-edge real-time tracking of behavioral analytics of people are, let's get unplugged. Welcome, Kalon, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks very much, Jim. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity as always.
Always. So what we'd like to start off with in these podcasts, Kalon, is just a quick overview about Fastsensor. What was its journey? What was that spark, that big problem that really prompted you and Daniel and others to build the great capabilities and technologies you have today?
Sure. Well, it's actually a fun story that I like to tell, and it starts with a beer. So a little company called InBev, who makes a lot of beer, came to Daniel Bashar, our CEO founder, and said, how do I get a customer to buy another beer? And he said, well, I like to solve problems with technology. So let me understand how customers are first buying. And the way they're buying is, of course, their behavioral analytics. And in order to study this, we needed to create technology that could effectively measure so you could then A/B test and improve. So the team originally looked at all the available shopper tracking technologies on the planet, things like computer vision, LiDAR solutions, Wi-Fi sniffing, beacons, etc. And there was always a critical missing link. And we call that unique identifier of that customer, so you can measure the entire journey. Okay. And the journey to us is the whole flow of the customer experience within that physical space. And their preferences are defined by or measured by their engagement and the behavior that, of course, drives all of this. So our goal was to measure this so we could understand how it worked, and then you have a baseline, and then you can start to A/B test by making changes in all different forms and fashions. So looking at merchandising, labor and operational components, digital signage, content and messaging, and different types of interactions with the customers and various call to actions. And then you put it into a real live environment instead of a test, and you see what is the outcome. And if you change one thing at a time, by definition, you have an A/B test. And that's really the core fundamental goal.
So to bring this into context, retail client, but you also work in other industries. We'll touch on that in just a moment. But a retail client essentially deploys Fastsensor sensors. You have an analytics backbone behind that runs in the cloud. You're essentially starting off with tracking individuals coming in to stores, the traffic flow at an aggregate level. And then, as you say, you start process of elimination, testing on different variables, whether it's the position of certain product in the retail environments, digital signage you mentioned, and others. Is that the right way of thinking about it?
Absolutely. So we like to come in, look at a statistically significant sample size. We don't need to do all the stores. It could be 10%, right? We want to define a acceptable confidence interval. Typically, we like to see 85, 90%, so we can be extremely accurate in the extrapolation and the application of the data from that smaller group of stores to the larger group, right? So if you run your test, quote unquote, in a sound fashion mathematically and statistically, then you can safely apply all these learnings that you learn on a smaller scale. So yes, we put the physical sensors within the space. I'll get slightly techie for a second, but the technology is called vector radio frequency trilateration. And what that means is that these sensors are listening to the radio frequency emissions that are passive and anonymous that are coming out of all of our personal devices. So our phones, laptops, tablets, Fitbits, Apple Watches, etc., are all emitting these radio frequency emissions in the public spectrum. And we are not engaging with the devices, we're simply listening to what they're putting out. And then with 3 or more sensors, we can locate those signals or that array. We assign a unique object ID and basically tokenize that user. And then we can continuously track their entire journey down to a square meter of accuracy every 6 seconds as they move through that physical space. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And when you say you're listening, you're essentially just listening for pings off of the devices. You're not necessarily looking at their data or what they're emitting, more just tracking the ping. Got it.
We're just tracking the location and the radio frequency vector technically of that ping from 3 or more vantage points. That's multilateration, and then the accuracy of the location gets more and more enhanced the more signals we get.
Right. Now, on that note, you mentioned taking a sample size of about 10% of the stores. You don't necessarily need to be broadly distributed. But I think it's also fair to say, Kalon, that a retail operation or store layout, let's just say here in the United States, might work differently in other countries just because of the nuances of the differences in how people interact in different countries. And so for the retail clients you have engaged, you're seeing that today, yeah?
Yes. So the beauty of an unsupervised artificial intelligence system is that it tells us what it found. We don't tell it what to look for, is the simplest way I can put it. So what we're doing is, as we study a space, the algorithms are unbiased with human interaction, because if the human defines what is the dwell time or what is the location accuracy or any of these kind of components that define that criteria, then they've introduced bias by definition. So instead, using an unsupervised AI system, we're able to listen to that journey, so to speak, right? We're not engaging with the device. We're not looking at what they're doing or the data. We just simply know that it exists and it represents a entity or a human, typically, right? And what we then see is, as the system builds its data set, we give it about a week, and it studies, and it gets smarter every day. With every new data point, it's a little bit smarter, a little bit smarter. The algorithms continue to refine the persona, which we call a qualified visitor. And then from there, we report on that qualified visitor. That becomes your average user behavior, okay? And I like to give the examples. I was visiting with some of my friends who sell a lot of coffee last week, and they said, well, how does this work in 2 different stores? They're very different. Can I use the data from this store with this store? And we say, actually, you can't, because let's say you have a store at a corporate park, right? You've got a different user behavior. People are probably going to be in and out of that store as quickly as possible, running to their next meeting with their hair on fire, trying to answer email, but their goal is fast. And then you go to a college campus. You've got the exact same store, same product, same layout, same footprint, same everything. Is the behavior the same? The answer is no. So applying a universal criteria set to all of these locations is going to give you wrong answers in most. So instead, with unsupervised AI, we can study and sample that store on that day, build the data set. And in the same way, I can do that in India or London or Los Angeles or New York. And even though there may be different behavioral patterns, the system will be accurate because it is sampling that particular location's data and their behavior.
Got it. Now, let's kind of nest this in a real client example where you are deployed. And in any big industry, there is the 800-pound gorilla, the incumbents. I think ShopperTrack is one such technology. Without naming names to keep it confidential, we'd love to have you take our audience through what is it? What's been the experience like for them? What were the outcomes that they're now benefiting from? And why you guys over maybe an established ShopperTrack or whoever else is in the marketplace?
Sure. So regardless of the brand, there's many companies that do similar to what ShopperTrack does. For example, they use computer vision primarily, and they use an artificial intelligence overlay. Most of these companies are starting at a door counter. So this is a walk-in metric, and that is a proxy for the number of customers in theory that are in that store. Now, these door counters can't differentiate employees versus a customer. So what happens? The numbers get skewed, right? Now, most people accept a certain margin of error because they're relatively skewed on a daily basis, but they can fluctuate wildly. So if you're using this to drive your demand, planning, your merchandising strategy, your labor, and all of these bets, aka investments, to extract the maximum return on your capital and that investment you make as a retailer, you're starting off from a skewed data set, period. Okay? Nobody, I think, is going to tell you that every door counter out there is accurate. Doesn't matter the technology. Okay? So when we don't actually consider these companies competition, believe it or not, we are compared to them. We do offer that metric, And I'll tell you that we very rarely use it when we do our deep dive analytics. Okay, because we don't think it's that accurate. We don't think it's that indicative of what's truly occurring within that store as far as how many customers are demonstrating purchase intent. So going back to how are we different and unique, we're able to tell you how many customers are in your store demonstrating purchase intent versus how many bodies cross the threshold. That's the core difference.
And are you able to correlate? Are you able to correlate that to transactional POS data too?
You can correlate it, but you cannot truly directly connect and attribute it, because you would effectively be crossing that border of personally identifiable information.
And that, I know from conversations we've had in the past around pilot opportunities, that was a line you weren't willing to cross, right? Because you don't want to expose that level of data. Got it. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Great. And then, so what is let's assume a client goes through the process of deploying initially at some small number of stores to get statistically valuable data that could then become a mapping for other stores. What's the ROI look like for them longer term?
Sure. So I like to call them billion-dollar questions. We want a customer, and the way we qualify is, what are you trying to solve? If you just want to put in the data for the sake of data, then we honestly will not deploy. So we must have a defined and documented goal. And it could be as simple as, I want to optimize my labor. It's one of the largest line items in their stack, so to speak. Or I want to understand a better merchandising strategy. Should I put these products here or here? Should I have more products or less products? And a few examples I can help tell you from an ROI perspective. In working with our friends at Honda, and we can talk about this case study, we looked at a large subset of their dealerships. We studied all of those dealerships, found a high, low, and a medium, and then we compared the high and the low. And we said, what is it behaviorally that is different between these locations? And when I say high and low, I mean high-performing sales stores versus low-performing. And what we learned over time is that there was one key primary metric that was differentiating, and that was dwell time. Now, retail generally, if you can enhance dwell time by 10% of your average customer in your store, you're likely to increase sales by over 13%. Okay, so that's a strong metric. So the longer people stay, the more they buy. I don't think anyone would argue with that. Well, the difference between 12 and 14 minutes is material, and when you're buying a car. And the difference is, when you're buying a car, if you get in the car, if you touch the car, you feel the car, you adjust the seat, you adjust the mirrors, you make it feel like yours, you're more likely to buy it. It's a process called transference. This is why every car dealer wants you to take a test drive. And before you do, they set up the car perfectly for you. It's not for safety. It's because they are selling you in that process.
They want you to envision yourself in that product. Yeah.
Go buy a house, and you walk into that house. Are there pictures of that family in the house? Generally not.
Right.
They take them down. Why? Because they want you to envision yourself living there.
Yeah.
And when you walk into somebody else's house and see all their pictures, it doesn't feel like yours.
Right.
Okay. So that same process of identifying what is the differentiating factor in this journey, and it's dwell time, but the dwell time is tied to the experience with the product. And with an enhanced experience with the product, the more likely you are to buy. So we took these learnings and we made some changes and recommendations within their space, specifically as a team, not just us, but as a team with the partner, the client. We recommended that they pull product out of some of their showrooms, because the low-performing dealerships were warehousing, the high-performing dealerships were showrooming.
Right. What's the difference between warehousing and showrooming?
In a showroom, there's room to touch and feel and engage. There's less product. There's that one beautiful car in the center that everybody wants to look at. In a warehouse, they're stacked door to door. You can't get in them. You can't engage. Okay? So by pulling products out, by making one small change, big change, but small change, low-performing dealerships have a documented return on investment and lift in sales of 42%.
Just from that data?
Just from that data. Learning that one little insight, I call that a billion-dollar question.
Right. And that more than justifies the ROI for the investment in your platform.
20 to 50 times.
Interesting. Let me ask you a question, my friend, because I'm not a big retailer, but I, as you know, do have two daughters. And let's just pick, my daughters will go and buy product from, name your favorite teen shop, like Abercrombie and Fitch and
Sure.
what have you. Those stores, have sort of their own uniqueness, as you've rightly pointed out. But how does that work for a retailer like a Nordstrom's, which has got different departments? And as a result of that, you've got different buyers, right? You have a specific buyer who's coming in for jewelry or shoes or clothes or other items. How do bigger retailers leverage the power of your capability, because it's such a dynamic environment compared to a smaller, more purposeful retail outlet?
Yep. So typically we did better in those smaller single brand, right? And higher end products, think jewelry, think high end clothing, where there's less there, but the interaction really matters. So to be able to isolate and pinpoint that. Then you go to a Nordstrom's or a Best Buy or a Home Depot. I call it multi-brand, okay? It's a different play. We partner with multi-brand retailers. We sell to single brand retailers,
Right.
okay? And what's the difference there? When you partner with a multi-brand retailer, you have a bunch of small stores in a large store.
Right, you do.
So,
you have the Apple kiosk, the Microsoft kiosk at Best Buy, or the LG kiosk for appliances or what have you. Yep, makes sense.
Yep. So each one of those brands is curious what's happening in and around their space. And they want to understand what percentage of that overall foot traffic are they capturing? How much engagement are they receiving? Are they in the right place within the store? Can I A/B test my experience at my pad, right? My SWAS. And so they can study it just like that smaller store within the larger store. So you call it a store within a store, and we will sometimes study those by themselves. Maybe just look at the appliances department. Or we can partner with that large retailer, the multi-brand, to sell the data back to all of the small brands within the store, because they want to know what's happening in their space, because that's billion-dollar questions for them you can answer.
I was going to go there. Those retailers, rather those product leads, like a Microsoft or an Apple, are they willing to actually pay for that higher level of data and access?
100%. They will pay for any edge. Okay. In my past life, I worked with large retailers like this and brought a different data set. I was doing LMS and influence factor data related to product knowledge. And we learned that the retailers, if they can, quote unquote, pay for data or access that will give that brand a slight edge so they can make a better decision about their space, about their pricing, about their merchandising, whatever it is that they still have control over, they will, of course, make those investments if they find ROI, right? And so we can show them ROI. We can start small, and you want to focus on a single small use case, prove your value, and then from there say, what else do you want to know?
Right. Location intelligence. Now, we've spent a lot of time, Kalon, speaking about retail. It's obviously a very lucrative, very big industry for you, but you've also cut your teeth in distribution and trade shows and others. Yep. Let's spend just a minute about kind of where your technology is being deployed today.
Sure. So key verticals, retail, events or trade show market, but any experiential activation and or a warehouse or distribution center. And I'm going to focus on that in a second, but let's focus on events for a minute. This is probably one of our strongest businesses, believe it or not. Total addressable market is smaller, but the pain point of the lack of measurement, the lack of quantitative data and analytics is extremely high. So brands spend millions and millions of dollars if you actually think about what is invested in this space. And they're comparing that investment to, let's say, a digital investment. And in digital, if I go online, I can track attribution, I can track the entire journey across the web, I can look at my call to action, I can A/B test, and I can effectively prove the value of that investment pretty handily. Now you walk into a trade show booth, you spent $1 million, and you have to come back to your CMO and say, here's what I got for your money.
Here's a stack of business cards I got, or whatever.
You have some business cards, you have some leads, badge scans, and 6 to 12 months later, when you've forgotten about this investment, you might close a couple deals. And then they say, was it worth it? And they ask the sales team, and the sales team wants to go on vacation in Vegas, so they say, we should be at the show next year. And I'm being extreme here, but you get the idea. And ultimately, they're saying, no, it helps me close deals. Okay. Well, what if I could make a better experience for that same $1 million? What if I could study that booth like I study my website? What if I could A/B test my booth, my location, the direction that it faces, the components and the activations within, see which one are people interested or not. What is the flow or the customer journey or visitor journey that occurs within that space? AKA, is there a correlation between product A and product C? Or is there a correlation and a conversion between B and D? That data is extremely valuable, not only on the trade show floor, but in the marketplace. So if I learn that doctors and nurses both gravitate towards product X, then I may market it and send that feedback back to my marketing team so they can modify their materials and their messaging and their call to actions to leverage that small critical data point, AKA a potentially billion-dollar question. And it is a billion-dollar question in a lot of our clients' minds because we work with a lot of biotech, pharma, healthcare folks who sell billions and billions of dollars worth of drugs and solutions and otherwise. And these small little reference points can be extremely valuable when amplified across the scale of their larger business. So that's the value.
Not only does it help with a better outcome from the event itself, but man, that's like live data. Not just digital data online from search results, but live data that they can actually use to reinforce, as you mentioned, a lot of their marketing and other positioning. Great. Distribution, you mentioned that. That's another vertical of yours?
Yeah, so warehouse distribution, we call it industrial. It's more focused on employee measurement. In this instance, everything else I've talked about to date is anonymous. There is zero personally identifiable information, global privacy policy compliance in that retail store. I don't have to know who you are, but if I know how all of you behave, I can understand you, right? Same thing in a trade show. In a warehouse, you know that it is Fred, and Fred does pick pack for you. And he takes a pick for product A, and he has to go down aisle A, make a right on aisle X, and up on aisle C, grab the product, and then walk backwards and drop it in the bin. How long does that take him? How far does he travel? If I can compare him to his colleagues and then use artificial intelligence to rank and rate them compared to each other and understand what some of our clients call time off task, and it's really ultimately a measurement of efficiency. So if he does on average 100 picks a day, and I can create a more efficient path and use of his time, which is a fixed quantity, and get 10% more picks out of that employee, what is that worth to the organization? Huge. Okay. Most of these third-party labor and warehouse and distribution centers are razor thin on margin, right? And every employee counts. So to finally be able to measure and see how they do and let the AI do it, not the boss who watches them for 3 seconds at a time or maybe 3 minutes if they're being very specific. No human can do what we're doing with artificial intelligence. No human can measure and capture that much data and actually accurately turn that into an output and then measure it against changes to see what is creating better outcomes or more efficiency. But AI can.
And more importantly, you're using AI to correlate all those disparate data points into a more cohesive view, basically. Yeah. Interesting. So the technology is fantastic. The average sensor covers how much in square footage?
Generally, we need about 3 sensors for every 1,500 square feet to get a square meter of accuracy worth of data. But it depends on the use case and the physical space. You know, your average trade show, we might have 4 sensors, 20 by 30 foot trade show booth. Technically, we can do it with 3. We get a little bit more accurate with 4, and we have a business continuity because there is no second chance at a trade show. So the system will fill as it needs. And in a retail store, small stores, 4, 5, 6 sensors, some larger stores, 20, 30, and they go up from there. Just depends on the square footage and the accuracy. And one thing I'll say is that it's not a one size fits all. So if I have a 20 by 40 foot store, we've press released our relationship with Chevron. We study some of their convenience stores. You know, their small footprint. Everybody's been inside a gas station, for example, in their convenience store. Then you look at, say, a furniture store, 100,000 square feet. Do I really need to know which seat you're sitting in on the couch, or do I need to know that you're in the living room department? Okay, so depending on the use case, we can reduce the sensor count, reduce the costs, and do like a 6 square meter accuracy or even a 25 square meter accuracy. And sometimes we blend accuracy, or what we call resolution, based on the use case. So I try not to play engineer. I let my engineers play engineer. What I try to do is when I talk to a customer, say, what is your goal? What are you trying to solve for? I would like to understand X. Great, we can help you with that. That's $1 billion question at scale. And then we can figure out the right technology to deploy and how much of it and where, and the frequency and all of these different things and what the reports look like to solve the problem, not just sell data.
Right. Interesting. My friend, we've covered a lot of ground today. Last question. You've done amazing with location analytics, AI, as we've just covered off today. What's the next 5 years look like for Fastsensor?
So it's continued refinement and isolating on what are the real questions people want to answer. Okay. So we're starting to perform a service that we call business analytics methodology, where we are interpreting our data to answer questions. So part of what we've learned is customers just want to know the answer. I don't want to dig through the reports. I don't want to log into the dashboard. I don't want to query the system. Just tell me, should I extend my store hours by 1 hour on opening and close? That's a real live use case. So that's happening now and continuing to evolve, and people are getting comfortable. Second, I think we're focused on continued applications of artificial intelligence. We are an AI software company at the core, but we've now, of course, like many people, trained LLMs with all of our unique data set, and we're allowing the customers and our teams to use those tools to answer questions more efficiently. So as I can create access to answers in a more efficient fashion, I can reach a larger market. So we're using AI, and we drink our own punch, and we are trying to use this to create efficiency within our business, to drive our costs down, to expand our reach. And so those things are happening now. Over the next 5 years, it's really a question of what do we want to solve? What's the best use, highest return, highest utility value in a use case that we can find to apply our unique technology to? And our technology is not perfect for everything, but our goal is to find the highest use of this unique technology and deploy it within that space. So we're looking at enhanced manufacturing type of applications and creating those similar efficiencies, looking at things like commercial real estate, looking at things like shopping centers and malls and venues. Instead of just focus on the small store, why not zoom out? Okay. Instead of just focusing on the trade show booth, why don't we track the whole show? Which, by the way, we are doing now. And we are becoming the official data and analytics partner for some of the largest trade shows on the planet right now. Outside of that, every day, my job is to listen to pain points, use cases, and try to find a fit where we can again be that strongest partner. We must differentiate ourselves with artificial intelligence, and we must do something that nobody else can do. If you're familiar with the hedgehog concept, it's what can I do better than anyone else in the world, and if I can focus on that, I'll be successful. So that's what we're searching for.
My mind is blowing with some opportunities that we need to catch up on separately.
Perfect.
Especially in the industrial space. So, Kalon, fantastic conversation. Just when you thought location-based anything was not that interesting, here we go with all the great stuff that you've done and the value you all created for your clients as well. Thanks for walking us through the example with Honda and Chevron and some of the other clients as well. We really appreciate it. Awesome. We're going to take this moment then to wrap up today's session and thank Kalon for sharing his insights and showing us how location intelligence is transforming industries. For our listeners, if you're excited about the potential for real-time analytics and behavioral insights, be sure to follow Fastsensor's journey. Here on Innovation Unplugged, we're committed to bringing the stories behind today's game-changing technologies. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone curious about the future analytics and innovation. Until next time, keep the innovating and stay unplugged. Kalon, thank you again, my friend, for being with us today.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Of course.